In Halcyon City, innocence was a rumor people repeated to feel better about the nights. It drifted like cigarette smoke in bars that stayed open past the hour when hope packed up and left. Here, the law wore a clean suit and dirty hands, and everyone knew it. The motto, painted in peeling gold letters above the courthouse steps, read equal justice under law, but the locals had their own translation. Guilty until proven dead. Jonah Creed learned that translation the day the siren stopped. They stopped outside his apartment building at 4:17 a.m., which was late enough to make the world feel unreal and early enough to make the consequences permanent. Jonah was awake, staring at the ceiling, counting the cracks he'd never bothered to fix. The sirens cut off abruptly, as if someone had yanked the cord from the wall. There was a knock, sharp, official, already accusing. He didn't open the door at first. He sat on the edge of his bed and waited for the knock to become a kick, because that was how things usually went in Halcyon City. When it didn't, he stood, smoothed the wrinkles out of a shirt that would never look respectable, and opened the door. Detective Mara Vance stood there with 2 uniforms behind her, their faces blank, their eyes already calculating the paperwork. Vance had a scar on her chin that curved like a question mark. Jonah had seen her before, in the paper, on television, at crime scenes that turned into cautionary tales. She was famous for her clearance rate and infamous for her methods. People said she didn't believe in innocence, only in timing. Jonah Creed, she said, as if the name itself were evidence. You're under arrest for the murder of Elias Rowe. The words landed heavy, wrong. Jonah blinked. I don't. Vance held up a hand. You'll have a chance to explain downtown. The cuffs clicked shut with a sound like a verdict. Elias Rowe was a name Jonah hadn't heard in years. He tasted it, tried to remember the shape of it. Rowe had been a journalist once, the kind who believed stories could change things. He'd chased a case Jonah had testified in, years ago, a corruption scandal that had burned bright and then been buried. Jonah remembered Rowe's eyes, sharp, curious, hungry. He remembered the warning he'd gotten after he'd spoken up. Keep your mouth shut, Creed. This city doesn't forgive. They hadn't forgiven him. They'd waited. The interrogation room smelled like old coffee and newer lies. Vance sat across from Jonah, her hands folded, her gaze steady. A recorder blinked red, watching them both. Where were you between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., she asked. At home, Jonah said. Alone. Vance nodded, made a note. Anyone who can confirm that? No. She smiled without warmth. That's unfortunate. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs, Rowe's body in an alley behind the Halcyon Herald. Blood pooled like a shadow that refused to move. There was a bullet hole just under the collarbone. Clean. Efficient. He was shot with a 9mm, Vance said. Same caliber you own. Jonah's stomach dropped. That gun was stolen. Reported stolen 2 years ago, Vance agreed. Never recovered. Convenient. I didn't kill him, Jonah said, louder than he meant to. Vance leaned back. You testified against a city councilman 8 years ago. Rowe covered the story. He named names. The case collapsed. Careers ended. Enemies were made. I did what was right. In Halcyon City, Vance said, right is expensive. She stood, gathered the folder. We'll talk again. They put Jonah in a cell with a flickering light and a man who slept with one eye open. The city pressed in on him, a weight he'd felt before but never like this. News traveled fast, and by morning his face was everywhere, screens, papers, whispers. Whistleblower arrested in journalist's murder. The narrative wrote itself. It always did. Jonah met his public defender at noon. Lena Ortiz was young, tired, and smarter than she looked. Her suit was wrinkled in places that spoke of nights spent on courthouse benches and mornings fueled by cheap coffee. They're going to bury you, she said without preamble. Unless we find something they missed. Jonah laughed, a sound that surprised them both. They didn't miss anything. They want this. Ortiz studied him. Why would they want you? Because I reminded them once that the law is supposed to mean something. She nodded slowly. Okay. Then we fight. They started with the basics. Timeline. Alibi. Motive. The problem with being honest in Halcyon City was that honesty left a paper trail. Jonah's past testimony, his disputes, his enemies, they were all neatly documented. There's something else, Ortiz said, flipping through the discovery. Rowe had been working on a story. Unpublished. His notes are missing. About what? Unknown. But I have a feeling it wasn't about you. Jonah felt a spark, small but real. Find the notes. Ortiz smiled, thin and determined. That's the plan. Ortiz moved through the city like a ghost, asking questions people didn't want to answer. She talked to old editors and younger interns, to sources who'd learned the cost of speaking. What she found was a pattern. Rowe had been circling the same names again, names tied to development deals and private prisons, to campaign donations that never quite added up. Hale had survived Jonah's testimony years ago. The case had collapsed on a technicality and Hale had emerged smiling, his reputation bruised but intact. Since then, he'd grown richer, more powerful, untouchable. One name came up more than the others, Councilman Victor Hale. Ortiz tracked down a former Herald copy editor who'd left the paper under a cloud. The woman's apartment was small and cluttered, walls lined with books that smelled like dust and hope. Rowe was onto something big, the editor said. He knew it. He was scared. Did he say who? Ortiz asked. The editor hesitated. He said the city eats its own. Then he asked me if I remembered Jonah Creed. Ortiz's heart skipped. Why? He said Creed was proof that truth survives. Sometimes. Ortiz left with a lead and a feeling, dangerous, intoxicating, that the truth might still matter. The courtroom was packed. Cameras flashed. Jonah sat beside Ortiz, his hands folded, his face calm in a way that felt like surrender. Vance watched from the gallery, her expression unreadable. The prosecution painted a simple picture: motive, means, opportunity. A disgruntled whistleblower silences the journalist who ruined his life. The jury nodded along, the story fitting together with the ease of a lie people wanted to believe. Ortiz poked holes where she could. She challenged the ballistics. She questioned the investigation's speed. She hinted at missing notes, at other suspects. The judge allowed some of it, shut down the rest. During a recess, Vance approached Ortiz in the hallway. You're chasing ghosts, Vance said. Your client's done. Ortiz met her gaze. You don't believe that. Vance's scar twitched. Belief is irrelevant. The pressure came from everywhere. Jonah's cell was vandalized. His mail went missing. Ortiz received anonymous messages warning her to back off. Then, a break. A flash drive appeared in Ortiz's bag one morning, unmarked, anonymous. On it were scanned documents, contracts, emails, bank transfers. They told a story of kickbacks and cover-ups, of a private prison deal that would have made Hale and his donors millions. Rowe's byline appeared on a draft article, incomplete but damning. There was also a video. It showed Rowe meeting someone in the alley the night he died. The footage was grainy, the angle poor, but the voice was clear. Victor Hale, Rowe said. The figure stepped into frame just long enough for a face to register. Councilman Hale looked older in the dim light, his confidence dulled by fear. The gunshot echoed. Final. Ortiz filed an emergency motion. The courtroom buzzed as the video played. Hale's lawyers scrambled. The prosecution objected, then withdrew. Vance watched the screen, her jaw set. When the judge called a recess, she stood and walked out. Hale was arrested that afternoon. His press conference lasted less than a minute. Jonah sat in his cell, listening to the news crackle through a broken radio. When Ortiz came to get him, her smile was real. They're dropping the charges, she said. You're free. Jonah exhaled, a sound that carried years of weight. Freedom tasted strange. The city hadn't changed. The motto still peeled above the courthouse steps. People still whispered. Vance found Jonah outside the building as the sun dipped low. I'm sorry, she said. Jonah studied her, the scar, the eyes. Are you? She hesitated. The system isn't broken, Jonah finished. It's working as designed. She nodded once. Be careful. Jonah walked away. Weeks later, Jonah stood in the newsroom of the Halcyon Herald, now quieter, smaller. Rose's desk was empty. Ortiz handed Jonah a printed copy of the article, finally published. He'd want you to have this, she said. Jonah read the words, felt the familiar burn of recognition. Truth was expensive. But sometimes, it survived. Outside, the sirens wailed, starting and stopping, reminding the city of what it was. Jonah stepped into the noise, alive in a place that preferred him dead. In Halcyon City, that was a victory.